Okay, so I thought I should come live to understand what we're doing here. I looked to see what Nevada was doing in regards to. I thought I should come live to understand what we're doing here. Because I was hearing double. So I think that I'm still live, and I don't hear myself anymore. But you see, the Nevada Department of Education is going to have a meeting on the 20th of August. And this is a state of the emergency meeting. They want to talk about, let's see, what do we see here? Diversity and equity. But through this whole paper, there is nothing in here in regards to student achievement for African American students. They actually just, it was a work group and they were receiving an update on the status of efforts to address the digital divide in Nevada. But just like, who were they trying to address it for? It certainly wasn't for African American students, and I've noticed that here in Las Vegas and through the educational system, they really just don't provide any support for African American children. The reality of knowing the data from, pre-K, from what do you call this, child find that requires that a district or a state collect information about children who may have disabilities when they are born is a responsibility of the state to ensure that access is happening. The deal is that we really just don't know what access looks like in the state of Nevada. At least I don't, because the data all demonstrates that African American children are not prospering. I mean, they're not thriving through this public education nightmare. And so, how do we change that as a people? That I don't know. What do we do to target support for our children? Well, I'll tell you, you have to really understand what public education is all about. You have to understand what education is and what the entitlement for education is actually. Because truly, it's just an entitlement. It does require, however, that we pay attention. And so I just shared that on Twitter, and now I just don't know where I was. I have to find the window, and I'm going to close that because I'm not going there. Well, here I am. And so this is an amazing program because you can do a lot of things. You have to just try it out and understand how it works. I don't understand everything, but I do understand some things. And so I was going to share this on Facebook too while I'm here. And so that way, I need to understand how this all works. So truly, people will understand just what's going on. Because if you don't know, you just really don't know what you don't know. And that's just true. You don't know and you can't know what you don't know. And simply, there have been so many people that just haven't been where I've been. Now, I can truly honestly say that. But I've had the opportunity to participate at every level of the educational realm that ever existed, I believe, because I'm 62. But my oldest child is like 35. My youngest is 23, which required a lot of time simply because he was, what can I say? They said that initially they called it severely mentally retarded and communication handicap. Just turns out he was autistic. So he was in the spectrum, high intelligence, gifted, and received services. And those services were amazing because you could actually measure the maintenance. He had social skills, he had communication, language development. I mean, all of these things were all broken down. And who paid for it? Well, of course, the federal government or the state government, or who cares? His education was paid for. What gets me and what I don't understand is how our people are so afraid of special education when that's Burger King in education. It's not necessarily the way they want to give it to you, but it is the way that you need it. And simply, it just, it doesn't happen if you don't know what you're entitled to. So here we are, and this is 2020. And, integration happened, and we were pushed into a system that already existed. But understand me when I said that there were so many Black people that were so intelligent. Bobby Seals and all those Black Panther people, these people had PhDs. They were just not no ordinary people. They made things happen. Let's not pretend that SNAP and, the early childhood medical whatever. I mean, there was just so many things, but this is America. And you know, we have been rewarded. We've grown, and now we're being punished. And the punishment comes from so many of us just failed to step up to do this specific responsibility of engaging in the oversight process of the outcomes of the dollars that are being invested on behalf of you. We must not pretend we don't invest in our community. Let's understand that every ball player, every entertainer, every sports, everything, and all of the people. Let's look at, even in tennis and golf, all those things generate dollars. And guess what? Those dollars come back to local communities by way of ding, 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 human capital. And so we have human capital. So, and it is something that just happens, and we're not a part of the outcome or the conversation about the failed services. It's not part of what we do here. I don't know what we do here. I think that, my children didn't get letter grades of F. My kids did not fail public education. They just did not fail. So my kids were very successful. And that's a demonstration of their level of skills that they have right now. Life is about skill development. What you do, self-analyzing your investment in yourself and in your family. People have to have skills, because if they don't have skills, what would they do? Boredom is real, and dysfunction is real. And so is survival. Survival is a real reality that we have to ensure that we are surviving. And what does survival look like for people like us who would go to school for 12 years and be socially promoted through the process? Just promoted through graduation. But if you don't have enough hours here in, you don't receive a regular diploma here. It's kind of confusing. They have it all kind of, measured. So many hours you get this, so many hours you get this. It's not about the standard of achievement. Because even if these kids are graduating, so many of them are working over there at the Goodwill. And the Goodwill is real because they take, and help people with disabilities. Supposedly, because it's a nonprofit. It's not for profit, but it is for profit here. And they even have an online site. So you need to be careful when Goodwill has turned to an online auction site. Seriously. Donations. Seriously. To train what? The failure of the public school system. There are so many things that, as a nation, we all have a personal responsibility for. Yet, and still, that is something that truly just doesn't happen. Or you could think it happens, but it really doesn't happen. I'm just not sure anymore what the expectation is of public outcomes when you can't measure them in its effort for, the investment in all nationalities or behind all races. They hate to disaggregate the data because it would demonstrate who doesn't really have access and who doesn't have access. But you need to understand what I'm telling you, and I've been telling people for a long time. Public education is a modification of behavior, nothing more. It is only a modified behavior. What am I saying? I'm saying that if your child has 150 pages of behavioral infractions, of willful defiance, it really has to do with Whose perception was it when they wrote that stuff in your child's record? Because guess what? You would have the right to know, but if you didn't ask, you're not going to get a response. It's just something that's just not going to happen. And then there are so many people who don't understand the personal responsibility of the development and the maintenance of a IEP for a child with a disability. So here we are, 2020, and I would like to say that we don't have the talented 10th anymore, meaning that 10% of our brightest children are not graduating with the ability to go to Princeton and Yale and Howard. And, yeah, and still we do have a great number of children who are going to these Southern universities. But what are we producing? We're not, I don't think we're producing independent mindset of radicalness, of looking at the outcomes for our people across the nation. Every state should have a level of outcomes that resembles the maintenance of effort or the benefit that went into, to have those outcomes happening. Well, I know Stevie Wonder makes a lot of money in tax. He pays a lot of money because Nipsey was talking about the $100,000 that these young people are making. And, rap, because they're worldwide. We're talking about marketed things worldwide. And, if I sold you one thing for $1 to 1 million people, I would have $1 million. Truly. It's the concept that I could reach more people. But if I can't reach my people and ensure that they understand that they have a personal responsibility to engage in the process to ensure that education happens for their people, for their children. I mean, not just their children, but the people that they're, paying the investment on, the taxes, tax dollars. We all pay taxes. I guess I'm gonna have to see how this really turns out. I'm gonna stop it at about 15 minutes. I'm on here live for 13 minutes and 44 seconds, but I don't know how it turned out because simply was hearing an echo of my own self. Then I had to mute the microphone, but I'm still talking and I can still see the microphone moving and I'm still sharing the screen. And so, anyway, this live stream. And, it's just like this. If you're talking on the phone and you're using FaceTime, it's just like this. Or it's just like this if you're talking wherever in any one of those little apps. They have so many apps that you can invite people in, have conversation, let them share their opinion. But hey, how is it that Nevada can address diversity and equity and inclusion group and not mention African American children, not one time, especially when there's so many of them in poverty, and especially because they don't have a maintenance effort, a demonstration model that would demonstrate that they actually had the same access to a level of support. You see, it's all about access and it's all about outcomes. And it really is all about investment and what that investment looks like because, they have to have something that they do and they're not willing to share what it is that they do publicly, meaning that it's a secret. You don't know how they have all these secrets with this federal money, especially when, you have to pay taxes. And my mother's always paid taxes because she's always made money. I may pay some taxes, but it doesn't really matter because of my disability. When I got my disability, it took all my money that I had invested in, in employment work, whatever. And then I didn't get paid any of that. But then when they did pay me, they took it back like they gave it to me. But they never gave it to me. They just paid themselves. But guess what? Who gets to complain? It's you. But if you don't follow through, guess what? You don't get anything. And no matter how you follow through, there are people that are working busily, busy, trying to prevent you from getting what your share of the pie. Let's not pretend public education has a responsibility, to supposedly transition one so they can be a citizen. 12 years of public education should bring a basic opportunity to engage in one society. But when they take all the tax dollars and they're paying for their health care, they're paying for their vacations, they have teacher training, all of this wonderful public monies are invested in supposedly the public. But when they're denying you access, what does that look like? I'm confused. How is it that we have so many children, the letter grades of F, and then promoted to the next grade? And then they're talking about social emotional learning. Do you know what the social emotional part of learning is? I can tell you, it's your child's behavior. They threw a spitball across the room. They were being disruptive. When my children were young, so many of them, when they were young, so many children were sitting outside of the door. When I would come up to the school to check and see what's going on with my children, there'd be little black boys and little black girls sitting outside the door of their classroom, waiting to be called back in, or sitting in the office. And some of these children, it was just an everyday occurrence. It just made you wonder, wasn't there going to be something done to assess what was going on with the student or scholar? What was going to happen? They did absolutely nothing. They do absolutely nothing. That's your problem. You deal with it in 12 years. But as long as they're going to get paid, they're going to go to Greece or Europe or Spain and spend their summers and enjoy themselves and come back and still give your kid a letter grade of F. Are we committing a level of fraud that just doesn't have the ability to turn itself around? Because our children are not getting a benefit. And even if they are, some of our kids are so gifted, but guess what? They're bored. And the engagement doesn't happen because the perception is there. I mean, people have a perception of who you are, and they have a perception of what they think they have to respond to you. But as a citizen, understand me when I say that my concerns are the concerns of others who have children and whose dollars are invested in the local community to bring support to the children. But why can't we find out what's happening to children that look like me? I'm confused. Why is it that they have a 259% dysfunctional behavior, willful defiance issues in the state of Nevada? And maybe that just looks like that in every big city. I don't know. Maybe it is just what it is, right? At least that's what Trump says. It is just what it is. Well, how can you change it? Well, I will tell you, parent, it is up to you to figure out what's the most successful program that's doing things for children who look like you. But then move your child over there. Because guess what? Trump said the money follows the student. And if you watch the PBS broadcast, they had this guy that sits on the Commission on Teacher School Funding on the school. And he was talking, and he really does understand the funding mechanism. And he also understands how to move the money. During the May revise, I was so geared into what the May revise was really about as the chair of the district advisory committee, because even we did not get to talk to the district in regards to how they were going to use that money once they pulled it back from the schools who didn't spend it. But every school still has a responsibility to kind of like produce that data to demonstrate how they're paying people. But here in Nevada, it's just an unusual thing. I have to scratch my head again because they give all the schools equal amount of teachers and resources. They pay people out of Title I, but those Title I people who are getting the paychecks out of Title I really have no interest in the maintenance of effort of those children who are generating the money. It's just funny, honey. They have no responsibility to measure the maintenance of the effort and the outcomes of the children who are actually just generating those dollars. Ching ching, ding ding ding. Always understand it was human capital. So you should understand that human capital is real and it's us. So I'm going to end this stream for now and see how it turned out. See how if I was actually sharing live on Facebook and see how that all turned out. But I'm going to keep coming on because this is just this meeting on Friday. I suggest you go to the Department of Education's website, the Nevada Department of Education website, because when I come back in a few minutes, because you know what, I'm going to tell you, the Commission on School Funding is happening, and it's going to happen Friday, August 14th. It's already gone, right? That means they met on Friday the 14th at 9 o'clock. And I think that they're going to meet again, and I got to figure out what day they're meeting. Yeah, because need to know what it is that they're doing. Because, like I said, every school generates a dollar or a child, and but they get the same equal amount of teachers, equal. But when the schools where they have high poverty, they put a lot of temporary teachers over there, and substitute teachers do not participate in the planning of the school plan. So substitute teachers really don't work with the students. They're just there to kind of like babysit. Maybe there's some really good subs that are able to identify weaknesses in a student's uh, support and be able to share some support. But when Nevada only has what 7 children that the NAACP wanted to recognize for moving towards the UC standards, graduating with the university level standards, 7. With that met the university level standards, 7. And then they didn't want to talk about nothing else. The NAACP actually avoids talking about the neediest children and the children in poverty and the workforce investment money here. They don't talk about nothing. They do, however, love to go and take pictures and invite important people to the meeting to give presentations about what they're doing. So I guess they just share what other people are doing. I'm really confused because I thought the mission of the NAACP was to empower the public. They ain't empowering nobody except for their own self. They're self-aggrandizing people. I mean, they love to take pictures. You go to the Las Vegas NAACP website and you will see the glamorous people because they glamorize themselves. Now, regardless of the poverty, and regardless of the failure, and regardless of the outcomes in the community that they can't tell you about because they're not addressing those needs. And I see that. So I paid my dues, and then they took the dues, but I'm still a member of the NAACP in good standing. And so therefore, they don't share any of the meeting information with me. They don't share anything. And my unit was wrong, and I asked them to change it several times. But all they could say is, I was at one time going to the education committee meetings, but then they wrote and said, hey, I'm not a part of that education committee. I mean, who am I to say what I am and what I'm not? They said what I wasn't, so I'll say what I am. I am, however, a strong advocate for children with disabilities in America. And I'll just put it like that. I helped a young lady whose child was being labeled some kind of sex predator. He was only 5 years old in kindergarten. But, she was able to get that stuff all out of his record because it required her to do a level of, investment in her son. And she was willing to do that. And she thanked me because she just needed a little bit of help. And most of the time, people just need a little bit of help. But most of the time, they don't understand the help that they need because they don't have the ability to understand that they should be able to measure the growth and development of their child with any other child that is a peer their age in the public school system. Regardless if that child is the brightest child or your child is, not the sharpest needle in the box. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't change the responsibility for the district to educate your child. I mean, if you accept failure, then you accepted it. If the community accepts the failure of the African American children now, while Black lives are supposed to matter, somebody help me with that. How do Black lives matter when the reason they're killing our children on the streets because they expect them to not be knowledgeable? They expect them to be out there hustling because they know they was in public education for 12 years. They know they dropped out and everybody gets hungry. Everybody has to have a place to lay their head. Everybody has to have a place to take a bath if they bathe. But honey, I didn't see some white folks here whose skin was black because they ain't had a place to bathe. So the resources here, I can say I don't see that they exist in all areas of Las Vegas because even the white people don't have access to resources. I don't get it. I've never been homeless, thank God. I ain't never been homeless. And I really didn't want to be homeless. But I can see how some women just take the abuse simply because where would they go? They have no one and nothing. There are so many young people that are caught up in the foster care system that don't have the extension of resources that would sustain a person if they have children, and just need a little bit of help to go to the next step because those avenues really don't exist. I mean, I know so many people that are just caught up and they get caught up with people that are abusive and then make you look like you're the fool. I can tell you, you have to love yourself more than anyone else in the world. You can't put yourself out there for someone to trample on you because God didn't give it to you like that. He gave it to you and He made you the best, immaculate person that you could possibly be. You could work towards excellent because you have the ability to be excellent. I make sure that I am good at what I do. And I make sure that I follow through. Because follow through is everything. So it may take a long time, but I'm still I'm still on grinding, trying to understand just how it is that in my 62 years, what I have seen and the destruction of the implementation of the public education system where there is no accountability, zero, and people have houses, people have car loans, people have vacation, people have yachts, all paid out of the public dollar to provide a service that is what, criminalizing people? Help me with that. That's some big time crap, right? Just help me with it. How do children go to school? And then see, I try to tell these people it makes a difference that an 8-year-old African American child will commit suicide that's been bullied. It makes a difference that these children are not uh, getting these access to skills for self sustainability and understanding the importance of self love. I mean, the public school system's got to do more than just educate. The partnerships between the welfare office and the partnerships between the health and human services, all these partnerships that we have with these dollars of federal dollars coming back to sustain the community, help the county, help the city, help coordinate services. And then what do we have? We have the worst messed up system where people cannot get a benefit, right? Where people get stuck in a place where they don't know how to get out. My son said, "Oh, education, mom, you say education, education, because education is the ticket. It's how you move from one level to the next level. It's what you learn how to participate in the game. And it's how you understand the game is implemented. Because there is zero accountability if you have none, if you demand none, if you don't ask, you don't get. I don't get it. I'm trying to understand the game here in Nevada. Some people understand a little bit of something and they take it all the way. But guess what? A lot of people don't understand enough of something because nothing has changed. So what? You do a little bit for your person over here, but there's thousands over here that are dying. Help me with that. I just need a little help trying to understand what the foundational support that we're creating to ensure that access happens for all. Because I don't see that. Because I don't see that the district is talking about the inability of all children moving forward through the system. They talk a lot about GT kids and special education as if GT is special ed, but it is. It is because it is. Gifted and talented is a gift. And so if these children need additional support to just expand their ability, guess what? They get it under G, under GT. There's just so much you don't know, especially if we're going to sit back and create these programs of behavioral support with no MOU to ensure that the academic standards are happening for these children also. No, you're just providing the behavior maintenance stuff, that how they got into the program in the first place. I don't know how they assign people to partnerships that don't have a credential status. You understand what I'm saying? They're not educational programs. They are programs that have to deal with behavior. Well, come on now. I said it before. What is a FAPE? It is a functional behavior modification. And what you get? If you were getting letter grades of F, that's all you got. But what could you do when you got out? Okay, you were looking at some choices that really, really, really do not create independence. And so, here we are. Some people have some skills, some people can survive, but there's a whole lot of system dependent people. And then when they're not system dependent, guess what? They're running game because they're running game, and the game is just like Grand Theft Auto. But the only thing is they're running drugs and they're running whatever they can run in order to be successful, in order to have a little bit of change in their pocket, in order to be not to be looked at like, whatever, just to have a little bit of change. And guess what? They know. They watch you. There's nothing that they don't know. They know everything. Everything, everything, everything. And all these satellites and stuff are just, collecting all this data. But guess what? You see, the sun got a little problem. The sun has a little problem. The sun has a little problem. And know this, COVID-19, know that there were dinosaurs that were living here before us. But there's no more dinosaurs living now. So you can pretend that you ain't got to change. You can pretend that we don't have to work on ensuring sustainable outcomes for all Americans, that we're not looking at. Because I'm going to tell you, some of these folks ain't coming back to work because guess what? The money does follow the child. And I don't see that I would want my student in a position of failure where they're not thriving and where you cannot demonstrate what you're supposed to be doing is teaching. And if they're not learning, then you don't get to be the teacher. That's how it should be. That's how it was for me in the public education system, but I worked within the district and I had the right to go wherever my son got the most support. And that's kind of like how it works. But if you don't know how to ask for it, you don't get it. So what should I say? What should I say? Reality is real. You only get what you know you have a right to have. So this time during this COVID and this reauthorization of life, because life is about to reorganize. If we let Trump get back in office, he's already tried to stop Social Security collection of taxes. There's so many things he's just decided that, hey, and he's already that 19th Amendment this morning where he said that he didn't force no poor people to be integrated, no poverty people, no low income housing in higher poverty elitist neighborhoods. But guess what? I ask once again, what is the accountability for these third party providers who are providing services, public services, and the outcomes and the maintenance? I mean, you don't even get to protest for your rights. You don't get to ask nothing. You don't get to share your concerns, but you do have power. And see, this is the kind of power that I understand how to deal with. This is what I know how to deal with. I want to know from the other African Americans who are all involved in the engagement part of education for my people, why is this meeting not addressing the inequity of the African American student here in Las Vegas? Why are they talking about Native Americans? And they mentioned two people, two different types of American Indian and Alaskan Native students and the services. They didn't mention nothing about no Negro or no African American. And actually, when you go on the Nevada Department of Education's website and type in African American and you go to CCSD's website and type in African American, I don't know how many times it come up, but guess what? It's not much. They just don't talk about y'all here. So I can say that perhaps they don't talk about y'all because y'all ain't talking. So I do talk. I understand there's a problem here. And it's one of establishing that we all have a responsibility to oversee the public outcomes of the investment of the public money in public education to ensure that access is happening for all children. I mean, I emailed someone up there at the education committee, meeting people, up there in Nevada Ledge, and she said, is there a specific data set that I want? That's what the district wants to pin me down to. what data am I requesting? No, baby, I'm not. I'm said, I want to know how your programs are being operated. I want to know how you're including all children, and I want to know what you're doing at each grade level of transition that happens for all kids, and how you're measuring what you're doing for those children, because you don't have any data from 0 to 5, from from entry to the 5th grade. You don't have that data. Okay, no, beyond the 5th grade. I don't know what the data looks like, but I do know that there are so many alternative programs. And guess what? If it only took 2 moms to start Faces, and Faces has an office in the State Department of Education's website. I mean, housing, they got an office up there, 2 moms. And they are coordinating parent involvement for all the whole CCSD district. And I don't know how they're paying them, but I bet you they're paying them some money, 2 mothers. But see, I don't know how they address the needs of all families, because for whatever reason, they just don't have access to folks who look like me and you. And, not that I didn't meet those women, I met them, but it's that we don't have anything in common. So there was no reason for them to reach out to me again after I met them. I met them at a board meeting, actually. When I met Linda Cabasso, whatever, she's that other board member that's in my area and who never bothered to call me back because she didn't want to discuss anything. You understand what I'm saying? And so it's very difficult. I mean, had a blessing to share the Azumi, what, Dina Neal, I think her name was. But guess what? I got an invitation and I could ask those questions, the questions that are relevant. How are they providing services and demonstrating that they're providing services to the children who are generating those dollars? Those Title I dollars, those free and reduced lunch kids, those neglected and delinquent kids, those homeless kids, all those kids. That's what I'm talking about. How are they providing services and how do they coordinate those services? I just didn't understand how they didn't have the data for all the children that were in poverty, because those people get food stamps and they get a monthly allowance, and they also have Medi-Cal. And I don't know how the school district is coordinating the additional services, through Medi-Cal and Medi-Medi, and because that's part of the reimbursement money. But I don't know what kind of partnership they have. I haven't seen no MOU between the county and the district, CCSD district. And I don't know how they're the largest school district, 330,000 children, if they're not including all the children in Clark County. They have those subsets and sub-districts in here. I just really don't know how. But I know that, in the school commission funding thing, people, they were talking about they had children, schools with 7 children. 7. Let me count it again. Schools with 7 children, okay? So they make sure that those children get access to education in the rural areas. But quite frankly, I'm really still trying to understand the Harbor program and the SOS program and how they are providing academic content standards and maintenance of effort to those children who have been either, kicked out of school or have a juvenile record or whatever, how they still providing access to education, because, pimping ain't easy, but damn, I always say someone's got to do it. And it seems in Nevada has an expertise on pimping. And that's real. They take advantage of everything. They are truly engaged in benefiting and denying access to all children who might look like me, especially children in poverty. So guess what? It's just not happening for a few. It's not happening for so many. That's why I said that I can't accept the dysfunction, because it's like, oh, well, it's like it's always been that way. And, kind of like, oh, that happened a long time ago. No, because Title I did happen. Charter 1, Chapter 1, Title 1, Leave No Child Behind, Goals 2000. I mean, we're just all in, supposedly, developing a stronger base for stronger outcomes for children who would need additional services. And I just don't see it. Do you? I don't see it for the African American community. I'm not going to make no excuse, but guess what? You can have a little program. I don't care where you have a little program targeting a little few kids, but if you don't have the data for all the children, then you're not doing that. It's just not working. It's a broken program. So perhaps you need to look at revamping what you're doing, because it's not working. And if I could just log on to the district's website and see how many schools in the district was really addressing those children, and that you had this data locally and not statewide. You can tell me you get the money locally, but if I want to know some information, I got to go ask the state. Are you serious? You're paying those salaries right there in that local school. And that's where the outcomes have to be held accountable, not at the state level. State doesn't accept responsibility for the failure. Or maybe that's just why they're running all those children in juvenile hall. I mean, because they got to go somewhere because we know they're going to commit a crime because they can't read, they can't write, and they're not employable because they're just ignorant, right? We've allowed ignorance to come, and then they help a few white kids. In the Goodwill, Goodwill is full of young white children who see that as an opportunity for training and first job, and older African American women. I haven't seen, and a few African American men who understand that that's an opportunity. But you just don't get to continue to get out here and act like you're doing a whole lot of something and ain't shit changing. Nothing changes. And so we're looking at how the federal government actually provides these dollars and the maintenance of effort and what the intent is behind those dollars. That's what I want to know. How are we ensuring that all children are getting access to the public education system? And I don't know what the front door is open. So, anyways, until I'm gonna have to sign off for a moment and stop this live, and I will get back on and see what I can do here. I'm gonna say subscribe to me, follow me on YouTube because this is where I'm right now. Follow me on Facebook because that's where I'm gonna be, and then I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn and any kind of outreach program where I can figure that we need to engage people so they understand they're paying the taxes for the public services that are happening and they have personal responsibility to ensure that access happens for all children. And how are they holding their local government accountable is what I really want to know. How is the Black Caucus holding the nation accountable for the outcomes of the lack of investment in the African American community? Because that's why our children are out there protesting and risking life and limb. And guess what? The abuse is real. They're abusing them just like they did in the 60s, beating people like less than humans. That's some crazy stuff. We as Americans need to get a grip on America. If we're going to save ourselves, we're going to have to save our nation. And we're going to have to stand up. So I've been on here now 43 minutes and 28 seconds, and I'm signing off. So until I come back on again, you have a great evening. So I'm not even recording. That's crazy. I thought I was recording on the computer, but I know I'm going live on Facebook. So this is interesting. Let's see how it all really works. Okay, and the live. And those are on YouTube. Okay.